Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the January 21st, 2026 special meeting of the Fair Oaks Ranch City Council. The time is 5:32 p.m. and we'll begin with the roll call. When I call your name, please say here or present. Mayor Maxton.
Here.
Councilmember Stroop is not present. Councilmember Roden.
Here.
Councilmember Olvera.
Here.
Councilmember Pearson.
Present.
Councilmember Parker.
Here.
And Councilmember Swearick.
Here.
With 6 of 7 members present, a quorum is declared.
Thank you, Amanda. Would everybody please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A reminder to everyone here tonight that our meeting is live broadcast. I'd like to welcome everybody that's here with us in the council chambers and those that are joining us online as part of the live broadcast. As part of tonight's meeting, if you do get an opportunity to speak, I'd ask you to use the microphone at the podium. That way we ensure that the individuals that are watching by live broadcast can hear the comments. And for those that do get an opportunity to speak as part of the meeting, I ask that you introduce yourself, and whether or not you're a resident of Fair Oaks Ranch, or if you're with an organization here as part of the meeting, which company that you're here speaking with or for. We did not have anybody sign up as part of citizens to be heard. Is there anybody here tonight that didn't get an opportunity to sign up that would like to speak? Okay. With that, we'll move on to the topic tonight, which is really a review of our strategic planning workshop. And I'd like to start off by thanking our city staff and our city council for supporting tonight's special meeting. What we're doing tonight, really looking at our strategic action plan, is preparing for the future of Fair Oaks Ranch. And I think it's extremely important, the process that we're going through. We do have a good strategic plan that's been in place, but I think it was time that we took a look at this and did some review. And as part of the process, we've already had citizen input, we've had staff input, stakeholder input, and also the steering committee. Serving on the steering committee, Dale and Jonathan are with me on the steering committee. So we've been introduced to a lot of the information that's been a part of the planning process so far. And really tonight's council meeting is to bring the rest of the council up to speed on what's been done so far, the information that's being collected. And then tonight, I believe we're going to review parts of our current strategic plan as part of the process tonight and how we move forward. We'll also see a schedule as part of tonight. But again, I'd like to thank council for supporting tonight's special meeting and being here tonight. Thank you for taking the time. And with that, I'll kick it over to Jim for introductions.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, Council. The only thing I'd add to your awesome summary, Mayor, was this meeting with the council for this strategic planning workshop with the council is the last meeting of the public engagement pieces in this phase of the project. So we're kind of getting to the end of phase 2. We'll be going into phase 3 here in the next 3 or 4 weeks or so. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Patrick Ibarra. He's our strategic planning consultant for Mejorando Group. Patrick, the floor is all yours.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Delighted to be here. So in front of you, you have some materials. So let me point to those and we'll review these. There's 2 documents. I'm going to call this one the handout. So please refer to that because we're going to be working this material tonight. And then there's the schedule. As we were preparing for tonight's meeting, there's always the discussion to say, what are we trying to accomplish, both with the strategic plan and with tonight's meeting? So with the strategic plan itself, it's trying to help the city capitalize on your strengths, of which you have many, and continually be successful by choice. It's helping the city be intentional. Historically, generally, government tends to be reactive. This is your opportunity to be both responsive and proactive. A lot of change is happening in this community. There are constraints within that. There are also opportunities. So my role is I'm not the author of the update. I'm a flashlight in a mirror shepherding the process through this. So tonight we want to have an opportunity to allow you to immerse yourself in the current strategic action plan and also obtain your ideas about what changes you think might need to be made. I've had the good fortune of speaking with all of you, but those are all individual discussions. Tonight we want to have a group discussion. I put some timetables down on that agenda just as a way to gauge progress. If we need to move sooner, we can. If you want to have a little longer discussion, we can that as well. So I'm trying to find a decent rhythm for tonight's meeting. Fair enough? And I'm going to do some capturing up here on the flip chart pad. Whatever I capture tonight up here, I'll summarize and make sure a copy is distributed to you sometime in the near term. So let me get started here. When you look at item 2 on the agenda about the benefits from good government, and I put on page 2 of your workbook there, if you would open that up, the benefits from good government, the role of the local government is to be the facilitator for a better quality of life. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody in this room, especially mayor and council, about what you're trying to help accomplish to sustain that quality of life. I'll come back to that here in a few minutes. We know that sometimes people have lots of opinions about what government should be doing. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Do more of this, do more of that. That's just the nature of communities, right? But I have found it to be very valuable in sessions like this with elected officials to start off with what's happening in this community as a result of the decisions that you make and that the city manager and the staff execute. In other words, what are the benefits from good government? What do you see happening in this community? Are you in the outcome business? Are you in the output business? And I would offer to you, local government is always in the outcome business. So what do you see happening in Fair Oaks Ranch as a result of the decisions you make? What gives you a sense of satisfaction as an elected official? I know you don't do it for the great pay and benefits. So what's happening in the community in Fair Oaks Ranch that you feel proud of when you look around, when you see it, when you experience it? What gives you a sense of satisfaction that you're making progress as a community, that you're sustaining that quality of life? What do you notice? And I'm going to capture it up here. Whatever you want to share. There's no right answer to this. It's purely your point of view. What do you think?
A lot of comments on the last a few years, and good comments on the streets in Fair Oaks Ranch and their improvement and sealing and striping, et cetera, is really makes it look sharp.
Yeah, absolutely. Provides not only functional, but there's also some aesthetic value to that.
Absolutely.
Right. So, thank you. What else do you notice? Yes, Councilman.
You know, it's a safe place. We got a good police force. We have quality individuals running that. High ratings for the city compared to other cities.
Right?
People can feel comfortable living here.
Absolutely. There's an old saying that whatever you're achieving on purpose. You're not achieving on accident. So when you're in the outcome business, as local government is, you're doing this by design. Being safe and having good conditioned streets didn't happen magically. You had to make choices. There's no shortage of competing priorities. Right? And you're a demand-based organization. Government only exists because there's demand for what you're trying to provide. So, what else do you notice around? Pardon me?
Cost effectiveness.
Cost effectiveness. Not only what you're doing, but how well you're doing it, right? How well you're delivering those services.
Good people, good residents. You know, the kind that wave, the kind that stop and help people, friendly, good community.
Absolutely. Good neighbors. We hear a lot of that last night at the public meeting yesterday and last night about people just feeling connected to their neighbors. A little bit of sense of socialization of that, which is good for communities. Connectivity. What else do you notice in the community happening?
It's hard to find a house here. So, and
That's good.
Honestly, people are looking to move,
All right.
and the face of the people that are moving here are younger, as opposed to folks that have a little bit longer in the life.
Yeah, in a way, there's the term, some communities will describe themselves, they're a barbell. So imagine a barbell. You're getting younger at the same time you're trending a little bit older. That's happening in a lot of communities. And younger people tend to have different appetites and different expectations. So that came through our conversations and it came through the public meetings as well. Obviously, school enrollment, that came up today during our stakeholder meeting. They were extrapolating some of the trends they're noticing with school enrollment, fairly stable. So that's another indicator, right? Yes.
The city's financially sound, so the residents can feel confident that services can be delivered.
Yep.
So there's a focus on being lean, but yet not shortchanging, what is provided by the city.
You're the stewards, right? People want to have confidence in your judgment about how well you're investing their dollars in the delivery of services and improving the quality of their life in this community. That's a big responsibility.
I think we've heard compliments about fast response times, whether it's from police and/or EMS. But I think that goes back to product delivery.
And it's a priority, right? And we've all lived in places where some of those things did not happen for whatever reason. So you're trying to be successful by choice. And the strategic plan is trying to accelerate that, trying to emphasize that. Because some of I would offer, without seemingly overly dramatic, some of these are at risk. This is not automatic. You're making choices. You're trying to decide what you're going to do, and you also have to decide what you're not going to do. As I've shared with the steering committee, and I'll share with you, the toughest part about strategic planning is editing. And remember, a strategic plan is different than a budget. A budget is an allocation of resources. A strategic plan is about some items that don't always have a price tag. What do you want to try to accomplish through these many things that came up last night were not about spending more money. It was about re-emphasizing different aspects about the quality of life in this community, whether it's about water, trees, all these other things that are not necessarily a budget item, if you will. So, other aspects that you notice in this community that gives you a sense of satisfaction, a source of pride?
Kind of add on to the fast response time, that personal service from city employees to the residents.
Yep. It's very common in local government and in a lot of different sectors to talk about ROI. Does it pencil out? What's the return on investment? I'm going to sort of amend that a little bit throughout this process, including tonight. Instead of the ROI, to the mayor's point, think of the ROE, which is what's the return on experience? We live in an experience-based economy, and in some respects, the city is an experience provider. Keep it in mind that some of your employees have to tell people no. Some of your employees see people on their worst day. Pretty broad portfolio that local government's involved with delivering. But what's the experience? Even if they have to tell people no, how well does that delivered by the staff? I'm just sharing with you a little bit of how the space that government is in and what people's expectations are. I'm sure it's no surprise to any of you. Anything else that you notice around the community? Give you a sense of satisfaction or a source of pride?
Cohesion amongst residents.
Okay. Cohesion, which is an outcome about people finding common ground, around whatever it might be. Collaboration, cohesion. Not so much what the city's doing, it's the choices neighbors make. One of the things y'all talk a lot about in Texas, I sound like a local, what Texans talk about a lot, and I've done a lot of work with cities in Texas throughout my last 24 years in business, you talk a lot about character. It's part of your history, it's part of your heritage. Community character, to your point, individual character, which is totally different than personality. Character. How many of you live by the principle you try to leave a place better than you found it? That's a lifelong virtue, is it not? So what strategic planning is trying to emphasize that, is trying to accelerate that. The best days for this community are in front of it. They're just not a guarantee. So you're trying to do strategic planning to make sure you're always pursuing your potential. You're not just sort of sitting on your laurels. Right? You didn't get here because people made easy choices. Your predecessors were presented with sometimes really challenging circumstances, were they not? So you sort of inherit some of those, and you sort of are standing on their shoulders, and you're trying to make choices. And it's not always easy to know what choice to make. And I think in strategic planning, there will be opportunities to say, should we do this? We've not done this before. Maybe it's time to experiment. Maybe it's time to explore. Give it a chance. Let's see how we do this. I'm just sharing with you, right, opportunities. So, yes.
And also, I think what's part and parcel to maybe a couple of the things that have been said before, but I think the city staff as a whole is very proactive in planning and execution, because what we've seen over the last few years is a tremendous amount of work to get ahead of things, right? So we don't wait for things to break or become a crisis. We try to actually go forward in advance to establish a process and fix things before they break.
Yeah.
I think as a overall, the staff is very proactive in their work, and this session is an example of that, just trying to get ahead of our plan.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great observation to make, that you're always trying to anticipate what's on what needs to be done before it becomes a crisis. As I say, better to change before you have to instead because you have to. So I think that's a credit to the city manager and the staff that's a mindset, that they're not only living with today, trying to get stuff done, core services, but they also have an eye to the future to say, pardon me, how do we prepare ourselves for some potential changes? Some of that's a little bit risky, but the more you're seasoned you are, the more clarity arrives. You're trying to anticipate. So, all right. Well, I'm just trying to kind of set this table up or set this up for tonight, because I would offer to you that some of these things hang in the balance. These are not a guarantee. I'm not trying to be an alarmist, but in order to sustain the quality of life, you're trying to make choices because this community is changing, is it not? The question is in what direction. That was definitely evident in the public meetings. People want to maintain this lifestyle. Absolutely. And you're all very pragmatic. And based on my phone calls, this strategic plan is not a 180. You're not going to all of a sudden do backflips. You're really trying to be, how do we sharpen some of the blunt edges? How aggressive do we want to be? What level of change do we want to institute? What I find is people often want to do change until they see the menu. And then it requires people sometimes to do things different, and that can be disruptive. So remembering that this is not automatic, that you're trying to establish and reaffirm this, is one of the outcomes of strategic planning. I hope that resonates with you. Gives you a sense of satisfaction and a source of pride to sustain this. So, all right. Well, let me move on. Trying to just keep the process moving here. And you have a separate handout, which is the project schedule.
Patrick,
Yes.
excuse me. So do our elementary schools come into play here with driving citizens to Fair Oaks Ranch? But it's, if not at the top, a major top driver to Fair Oaks Ranch is the two quality elementary schools.
And what I have found in my practice, I have clients all over the country, different sizes, different cities, is the quality of schools and the quality of life in those communities, they intersect. Hard to say which comes first, right? But there is some symmetry between those two, where often you find a high quality of life, you often, not always, but you often find high quality schools. Where you find high quality schools, you find a high quality of life. There is an intersection there. I'm not sure they're causal, but there's definitely a correlation between the two, at least with my experience. So, well, let me direct your attention, if I might, to the schedule, which is a separate handout. And you can see that, and this is something that Jim and I, the assistant city manager, along with Scott, finalized in December. During the holidays, we were trying to get everything set in place, which is always a little crazy. But we were able to put the schedule in place. And I'm a big believer of maintaining momentum. So it's called energy capital. So we want to leverage it. So as we get started, we don't want this to linger into the future. So we're down into, at the bottom of that first page, you can see that we had meetings yesterday when I'm looking at Tuesday, January 20th and Wednesday, January 21st. We had employee focus groups yesterday. I facilitated 5 employee focus groups. We also had the open non-invitation meetings with the public. We had about 25 residents or so attend both the afternoon session and the evening session. Also released online last Friday, I believe it was an online questionnaire. We'll make sure you receive that link. And as of this afternoon, there was about 126 distinctive responses. That will be open for a few more weeks, asking people their feedback. And that will be a channel that's used as this process unfolds. So that's tremendous response in the early days of this, having this opportunity. And we do know that sometimes people may not attend physically, but they'll go online and respond. There's also a device in that process to where people can't stuff the ballot box. So it's not somebody saying the same thing over and over and over. There is technology to help to sort of manage to where people are not just reinforcing their point over and over again, just to share with you. And then we had a stakeholder meeting this morning. We had about 18 to 20 stakeholders. I think you were acquainted with the invitation list. Still in the process of reviewing that information as well as the public, so I don't have that in a handout yet because it's in real time. We just captured it yesterday or today. Again, good contributions from the stakeholder meeting, good contributions from the public meeting. We'll make sure that's included in the summary that's provided to you in the next week or so, right? But we do want to go over your feedback tonight. So that's the process where we are right now. And then you refer to page 2, if you will. We had a kickoff meeting this afternoon with the steering committee, as the mayor mentioned. About 15 members, mayor, 2 council members, city manager, assistant, several department directors, and a few mid-managers. They're sort of my point of contact. They're the work team, if you will. Have to push up their sleeves and do the yeoman's work on this process. So they had their kickoff meeting, and obviously we're having this kickoff meeting tonight. Then we move on to the examine, which is the next phase in this process. That would be February 18th and 19th with the steering committee. where they'll actually push up their sleeves and look at the input that's been gathered so far, and much like you're going to do tonight, they'll start to look at the vision and mission. We'll give a little time. There'll be some work done between that meeting and the next meeting in March, where they're refining things. So this process is iterative. It's not as though everybody's sitting in a room for an hour or 2 hours racing through this like a sprint. As I've shared throughout this whole process, this intent is not to be efficient. It's tended to be productive. Efficient would be we do all of it tonight, we're done, you send it out to everybody, but then people don't have any skin in the game. So we're trying to make sure the process is not overly elaborate, but it's also not a way to just people feel as though their head's spinning. So we want to have some level of serious involvement from the steering committee. And then as you see, April 2nd, so an aggressive timetable, the draft will be presented to you for your consideration. You'll be kept up to speed throughout this process in February and March with summaries. I'll share those with Scott. They'll be put in your packet. And I would ask that you sort of review those as Scott reviews those with you so you can see what changes. We're not sure what changes are going to be made yet. We're just trying to make sure that by the time the draft is presented to you, you've had a chance to at least get acquainted with any changes that might be included. So that'll be the first reading, and then the plan is May 7th where you adopt it. And then you're off. Some of the things in the strategic plan that may be considered are already underway. We're just not sure yet. It's not as though you start the strategic plan in May, you inherit things that are already in the queue. So it may be some things you're already doing, but this gives it a bit of a booster shot, especially about timing. And we know the first question that many of you will ask when this is considered for adoption is, sounds great, when are we going to do all this? So one of the items the steering committee will be responsible for is crafting a schedule. When are things going to happen? Summer, fall, we don't know yet. We're still in the design stage. So I just want to refer that to you so you get acquainted with the flow. Pretty aggressive timetable. Okay, any questions or comments about that? Feeling good? Everybody good? Okay. If I'm going too fast or something, please let me know. Okay? Slow
I
me
don't
down.
think they would hesitate to raise
I'm
their
sure
hand
they
and ask a
wouldn't.
question.
Yeah. So don't hesitate. Just let me know. I'm trying to have a good rhythm to tonight. So, all right. So the next item is on page 3, and that's the input we've gathered so far from all of you and from Scott and the department heads. It says summary of input gathered. And I categorize this into themes. Try not to read anything into the sequence. There's not priorities here. It's just summaries. Many of the comments that you shared with me individually were also shared with me from some of your colleagues. So that popped as a theme. So I'm just going to walk through this, get your reaction, find out if you have any thoughts about this. When we do this for the public, we'll do it in 3 segments. We'll have a summary for the public meetings, we'll have a summary for the employee meetings, and we'll have a summary for the stakeholder meetings. I think it's really important that you look at the input based on who's sharing it, so it doesn't get all diluted in one just massive list. Because then I think it's difficult, not only for you, but for the steering committee to extract from that. So I'll hit the highlights here. I'm not going to read this all to you, but the highlights on page 3, lifestyle was definitely maintaining that. The texture, the fabric, managing growth. Also looking at sort of the management side of this strategic plan. As you presented in the RFP that you issued last fall that I responded to, there was a heavy emphasis on measuring progress. So that remains. We're not there yet, right? We're not sure what's going to be included, but an emphasis not just to go, that sounds good, but how well do you know you're making progress on these initiatives? So we'll get into that a little bit later in the process, not tonight. To synchronize, some of you mentioned, or many of you mentioned about the recent UDC update. There was concern that the UDC update is in one direction, the comp plan, which will be later on, may be in another direction. Where's the strategic plan? You don't want to move along 3 different fronts simultaneously that may take you in 3 different directions. So how do you synchronize all that? So that the UDC will be a source document that the steering committee will look at as it updates the strategic plan. Emphasis on public safety. A lot of comments from many of you on infrastructure, especially around water. We also heard that a lot from the public. Water availability, water quality, also about stormwater. And we know people sometimes are fickle about stormwater until their backyard's flooded. Then all of a sudden it's urgent. So not unlike most communities where stormwater is kind of a hot and cold issue, but water. The budget, you have a 5-year financial plan. Many of you find value in that. That's wonderful. I wish more cities had that. Helps you kind of queue up, what's the future look like? And you're always updating that to kind of look out on the horizon. What are you doing on the revenue side? What are you doing on the expenditure side? What you've seen in the last few years is the revenue side gets a little bit more sketchy because of what's happening at the state level in property tax. Expenditure side you can do with a high degree of confidence because you can do some straight line extrapolation. but revenue gets a little bit awkward. I'm sure the steering committee will take a look at that as well. Potential impacts from state legislation. Speaking of that, you also have some partnerships in place, which you may want to leverage for dispatch, for fire service. Are there other opportunities? Because I would offer to you, the public just wants some of the services. Who delivers it is less important than the service itself. And I don't have a skin in the game in that sense, but it will be interesting as the steering committee looks at those issues. Do you really want to get in the business of filling in the blank, especially if you don't have dedicated funding for it? And what's unique, no surprise here, about Fair Oaks Ranch that I have not found in any other community is the number of HOAs and their role. What was interesting yesterday and last night with the public meeting, it's a little bit comical because there's ongoing debates in those sessions about how many HOAs there actually are. And depending on who you ask, you get a different number. Somewhere, as the mayor said, between 1 and 70 there is. But it was interesting as people talked during those public meetings, I think there's 40. Well, I think there's 60. Well, how about ARCs? Well, so I think that's going to be an opportunity as the steering committee looks at it. What's their role? What's the role of these HOAs? Because they're really connected to their members. And you do have that distinct dimension to your community that a lot of communities don't have. How do you leverage those? So I'm just sharing that with you as an observation. And then expectations of new residents, younger people that are moving here, especially around parks, trails, and amenities. So that was sort of just themes that I heard from all of you. If somehow I missed one of your items, it was not intentional. Then we look at the executive team. I talked to Scott and Jim and all the department directors to gather their input because they're looking at it from a slightly different point of view. Council tends to look at it sort of from the outside in. Staff's looking at it somewhat from the inside out. Not better or worse, just different. Their themes were about risk management and emergency management. There's always a concern. How you're dealing with natural disasters, how you're dealing with other dimensions that may impact the community. The whole concept of local control, whether it's about zoning, financing, transportation, your ability to sort of exercise influence and manage those resources, and how that is sometimes being impacted by the state and legislation. That's an ongoing concern, not unique to Fair Oaks Ranch, and really not unique to Texas. It's happening in many states around the nation. Growth management, a lot of directors talked about infrastructure, the comp plan update. The big point that a lot of directors made that some of you also mentioned was how do you maintain the current level of service with the current staff with increasing demand? Do residents in Fair Oaks Ranch have high expectations? I'll say it for you. Yes, they do. That's okay, right? Are they unreasonable at times? Yes, they are. That's okay. Do mayor and council have high expectations? Yes, they do. Are they unreasonable at times?
Nope.
Never, of course, occasionally. That's okay. It's great to live and work in a community where people have high expectations. But maintaining that in the face of ongoing demands is not just a simple transaction. You have to be really deliberate, as was mentioned earlier, about your strategy. The community outreach, again, no secret. Most cities around the country, regardless of their size, are trying to figure out what their social marketing is. I would contend that you're a little bit ahead of the game because you have dedicated resources to make it a priority. So you're well suited, you're well positioned to continually, not easy for me to say, not only tell but ask. And what we're finding around the nation is people sort of get tired of being told. They want to be asked. So how do you enlist that involvement, especially from people that may not always be paying attention? They're busy doing other things. Well, that's okay. Technology, city facilities came up a lot from department directors. You're sort of bursting at the seams in a way. You're kind of like an adolescent, a lot of hormones firing. You're trying to figure out what you want to be, a lot of things going on. But city facilities is a real constraint when you look at service delivery. The need for AI strategy, welcome to the rest of the world trying to figure out how to utilize AI. And let me just put a cautionary tale there. City government is still a manual labor business. So AI is not going to replace somebody in the water department to go out and fix a water main break. You're still in the manual labor business. It's somewhat distinctive in the whole marketplace where AI will be a resource, but it won't be a substitute for some of the services that are physically delivered by your staff. I'm just sharing that with you. When people fall in love with AI like it's the silver bullet, it'll be a resource, but it won't be a substitute for many of the manual tasks that you're responsible for delivering. Partnerships again, and then the opportunity to invest in your workforce. You are an employer, so you're recruiting and retaining staff. And I would offer you that's the critical element in maintaining your quality of services, the capabilities of your workforce. And you're competing for talent. So how you're positioning yourself as an employer, always an ongoing concern. So Reactions to that feedback, thoughts about that? Probably no surprises. Again, we haven't been able to synthesize the public input yet, but we'll have that to you in short order. Reactions to this, consistent with how kind of you see the world? Any thoughts about it?
I think everybody's had input to it. And,
Yeah.
I see several things that we discussed,
Yeah,
you know, it's there. I mean, it's one of those things that we know we have to look to the future, but we also have to be solid and honest about it.
yeah. Good point.
How we pay for it.
Absolutely,
We owe that to our residents.
absolutely. And I would also put on the table a little bit, just for consideration, I would contend that, with all due respect to finance, the city's most precious resource isn't money, it's time. On what do you want staff to spend their time? Because there's no shortage of competing priorities. So I think that's what strategic planning is trying to flush out. What are those top priorities? Also, some of the items in the strategic plan won't be substitutes for core services, they'll be supplements. So I would offer to you, don't measure the success of the revised strategic action plan by the length of the list. If you decide to do a few things really well, you can always scale it up. Hard to scale things down. And sometimes that's where the public gets a little bit impatient. But you're trying to think of, I would offer to you 3 time frames that the steering committee will look at: near term, right now, short term, the next year, and long term, beyond a year. Most cities do not do 5 and 10 year plans anymore. Too many variables out into the future, unless it's about capital investment, transportation planning. That's a little different, because you do have to do a lot of pre-planning to even get to the planning. But the concept of having 10 and 20-year plans, if you look back at the last 20 years, most cities have said, the further out we go, the more uncertainty. What's the point of having it? Let's focus on what we're doing here, now, right now, in the next year, the next few years. So, any other reactions to this? Again, let me know if I'm moving too fast or not fast enough. I'm trying to find a balance between a sprint, a fast food drive-through, and a sit-down meal here. Yes.
Patrick, let me ask you this. So are you looking for, are you trying to get us to share what we've input in the steering committee with the rest of council in through this? So if there are specific things that came up in the steering committee, like is this the chance to put them forward, or?
I would say pause on that. We're not really there, because the steering committee is just kind of getting its sea legs.
Okay.
There'll be opportunities to share what the steering committee is doing back with the council.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're trying to move somewhat simultaneously, but we're not there yet to kind of share input back with all of you. But you'll be kept apprised, because we're trying to make sure when it's considered for adoption, none of you go, I didn't know this. It's the first time I've seen it. But you've had a chance to at least get acquainted, get immersed, ask questions of your colleagues, ask questions of staff,
Absolutely.
right? We're trying to make sure the process is important so people feel included, including the public. So they don't feel as though, oh, we asked you in January and you didn't hear about it until April. What happened? So that's a whole strategy of itself, and as well as with employees.
Understood.
Thank you. Other comments? I'm sure there's no surprises here. But we had not done this in a group setting, so we wanted to help people say, oh, my comments are on there. They're shared by a lot of my other colleagues, and that's good. That's a good sign. All right? Doing well? Okay. Well, now we want to get into where I'm going to actually ask you some questions as we tee this up, as we get into strategic planning, because it's a valuable opportunity for me as a facilitator, and I think for the steering committee, to grab your input in real time. So I'm going to move on to page 4 of your workbook, which is called Headwinds: Examine the Present and the Future. This is where we're looking at trends. Remember, there's fads and there's trends. Fads are hiccups. Trends portend change. And I'm trying to just get your reaction. I'm going to share my version, but I want this to be an interactive discussion so you can look on the horizon. We're not trying to fix the trends, but government historically sometimes is not conscious of the trends, and then they try to put plans in place and go, oh, we didn't realize that was happening, because they didn't always pay attention to it. So I'm going to flesh this out and get with your ideas. In the middle is the acronym VUCA. You may be familiar with that. It stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, or another day that ends in Y, disruption. So as we look at these headwinds going clockwise, politics and citizen activism, is that increasing or decreasing in Fair Oaks Ranch? What do you notice, in person or online? Are people getting more engaged, or are they checking out? And this is an open discussion, so I just want to hear from your vantage point. What do you notice? More conversations with residents about what's going on? In person, online? What are you noticing? Uptick? People stepping back?
I think neither. I think it's pretty steady
Okay.
over the last 2 or 3 years. It's
All right.
about, several people are active and others, come in periodically. I don't see an uptick or a decrease.
Okay, that's cool. Other observations, what you're noticing, talking to neighbors, longstanding residents, new residents, people's interest?
Kind of like a silent majority in my thinking that they're happy, all's good, and not a high priority.
Right. Good point. Other comments, other observations? Anybody else noticing? Okay, so who knows where it's going to trend, but it is a component of a trend, right? Going clockwise, and I put COVID-19, but it's also the mistrust of institutions, which is at an all-time high. The challenge that we're finding across the country is people don't just mistrust government, they mistrust people who work for the government. Hard to build a community with that mindset. So there's an ebb and a flow to that. And I would contend government traffics in trust. This process may reinforce that trust that you have with your residents, that you're a credible community builder, that you're working on their behalf. But you're not just reacting. And it's the old concept Henry Ford used to say, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they'd have said faster horses. So you're not just leading by survey or leading by the squeaky wheel. And there's an old concept that public policy is made by those who show up. So you're trying to balance a point of view of people with also the other people that may not be as actively involved. You know that well as elected officials. Because you get calls from people. Some people think they're the 8th council member. They want to try to have that point of view. I'm just sharing that with you. That's not unique to Fair Oaks Ranch, but you're trying to balance points of view. You're the broker in that. That's happening. The economy, our consumption habits, how people are buying things. Think about how that's changing. What's that doing? We're seeing a lot more traffic on the residential roads from Amazon, are we not? I'm just sharing that with you. So what people are buying, how they buy it is changing. That's just going to continue. More and more, I don't know what the numbers will be for this last holiday season, but my bet is it's the 3rd consecutive year where people have spent more money online than they did in person. Probably not a surprise. Do we think that's going to continue? Probably, right? That's just going to, people are a lot more comfortable.
Amazon makes it so easy.
Yes. Yeah.
Time saver, honestly.
Right. We're constantly going from kind of brick and mortar to click and order. That's been an ongoing trend, and we're trending in that direction, which in a way starts to kind of give us pause about traditional retail. I have no evidence to support this, but my speculation is movie theaters are going to go by the boards pretty soon, and movie theaters are often anchors for retail development for walk-by traffic. So what's going to go in its place? I'm just sharing that with you, right, about people's trends and habits. So, shifting demographics. How is that changing in this community? You're getting younger. At the same time, maybe you're getting older. I live in the state of Maine, where they have the highest median age in the country at 45. Utah's the youngest at 25. 1 out of every 4 residents in Maine is 65 or older. It creates real challenges when you live in those places, economically, socially. So as your community's changing and getting younger, what does that portend? What are people's appetites? Your council's starting to trend a little bit younger, aren't you? This is my approach at flattery, right? Yeah. I have some clients in other states where the entire council is under the age of 40, like this group, you know. I met my youngest council member last year. She was 22. And this is a city of about 60,000 people. So we're seeing younger, which is wonderful. We see younger people get elected. And we're all a product of the time in which we grew up. I would offer you the diversity of your background, the diversity of all those different dimensions is a source of strength for you as a council. Thank goodness you're not all the same. But how do you blend those points of view? And the same thing with residents. How do you blend those points? Because there are some people who want to shut the door behind us. How long have you lived here? 2 years. So there's that bit of a challenge as this community evolves. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but just in those demographics and people's appetites. Service delivery. You are a service organization. How you're delivering services. To who? By what channel? That's going to continue. Some people are going to say, why do I have to come down to City Hall? Can't I just go online and do this? I'm amazed how many cities still take checks and they don't take Venmo. What year is it? Or Apple Pay? Any of those other channels. You know, people under 30, they go to the bank, they don't even know what a check, they don't even get a checkbook, do they? You have young kids in your family, like I do, They just get a debit card. What do they do with the debit card? They load it on their phone on Google Play or Apple Wallet, and then they use that to purchase things. I'm just sharing with you a service delivery. You are a service provider. So how you're delivering it is going to continually trend with e-commerce. Legislation and legal, you all know this well. One thing you never want to make in local government is case law. You don't want to be the reference point. And legislation, that's continually changing in the state, is it not? So here's a term you may want to get reacquainted with that local governments around the country are starting to go back in there, look in the past, bring an idea up to the future. And that's the term unfunded mandates. I've been in this business almost 40 years. I know I don't look that old. Thank you. So it used very common in the 90s when I was in city management, unfunded mandates. Some of what you do is regulatory, it was regulated by the feds or the state. Some of you have to pass, what you do have to pass on costs because you have to comply with requirements from the fed and the state is stipulating on your services. And the public doesn't understand that, but you're there to kind of bear the brunt of their frustration. I'm just sharing that with you. It was very much in vogue in the 90s, then it kind of went away. Maybe it's time to get reacquainted with that. And then the final one is social media. Again, if Facebook was a country, it'd be the world's third largest. China, India, Facebook. So how you're leveraging that to do social marketing. And you have resources literally here tonight that you're ongoing. It's an ongoing priority. So that's my version of sort of just the trends, but I'm curious to know, what are you hearing? What are you noticing? What are you reading? What are you hearing from neighbors? Concerns, trends? What are you noticing in just your driving around the community? What are you reading about how communities in Texas are changing?
I think biggest trend that we're seeing right now is growth. Growth in residents, growth in commercial, some within the city, but largely outside of.
Yep.
Traffic growth.
Came up a lot last night about adjacent development and the impacts it has on cut-through traffic. I sound like a local already, right? Cut-through traffic. People are talking about that, the impact of that. What else are you noticing? What else are you reading? What else are you picking up? There's some other trends.
The demographics trending younger.
Yep.
Younger residents desiring different things.
Blinkers optional?
I'll take that in the spirit that was offered. Also with older residents, just in general, cities don't build tennis courts anymore. What do they build?
Pickleball.
Pickleball courts. It's trending. I'm married to a pickleball player. If this is serious business, my advice, don't get between a pickleball player and their paddle. This is serious stuff. But cities that have rec departments are often on the cusp of changing habits. I grew up when I worked in city government, back in the wagon train days of government, we built Little League fields. Then came soccer people. Then we had soccer fields. Baseball people, soccer people. The Montagues, the Capulets. The grass is too tall, the grass is too short. Then came softball people. Then, like in Fort Worth and in other cities, they're building cricket fields. So recreational habits are changing, and cities are on the cusp of how do they adapt. I'm just sharing that with you to the point that was made to people, younger people, and their appetites. What do they expect? What do they want for a lifestyle? Maybe different than other people.
Closer services.
Pardon me?
Closer services.
Yeah. What else are you noticing? Other trends that can maybe concern you. Can't fix the trends, but we want to acknowledge these trends. Anything else that you're picking up?
I think increasing crime, not necessarily within the city, but in the adjacent I-10 corridor.
Okay.
So I think that when maybe people go out and they hear about it or experience it themselves, then in the back of their mind, they'll have that concern that could come within the city.
Yep. Yeah, crime does not start and stop at city boundaries, as we well know. Things just sort of happen.
And when I say I think I should be more specific, like a lot of property crime, like if you go to different large shopping developments, a lot of cars get broken into, things like that.
Right. Good point. Other trends you're noticing? Listening to neighbors, having conversations with them, maybe some of their concerns. We're not trying to fix the trends tonight, we're just trying to acknowledge them. We want to be mindful as this strategic planning process gets started in earnest that these are not left to later on And then people go, oh, well, that's a constraint. What are we going to do? One of the points I made to the steering committee, I'll come back to regularly, is part of the opportunity you have is to make the distinction between problems you can fix and issues you can only manage. Sometimes cities overstep. You don't really have this here, but a lot of cities are about affordable housing, whatever that means. Most cities don't want to get into the housing business. The only way they're going to address it is through land use and zoning. I'm just sharing that with you. So they're not going to fix it, and they're relying on the market and how they manage that. Vertical growth is trending. Multifamily zoning is trending. You want to pack the council chambers, change zoning, right? I'm sure and that's a push and pull of the market. Yes.
You know, we're, as you know, talking to the city staff and us, that there's very little commercial business in the city limits, and there's very little space for commercial businesses. But discussions I've had with residents is the spaces we do have, they would like to have more mom and pop businesses, restaurants, you know, places where they could socialize, right? So I think those type of businesses would be welcomed to the extent they would augment the community. But obviously, we're not talking about anything large like, you know, box store or anything. But I think people are looking for that nearby rather than having to go into Bernie or go down to Leon Springs. Some nice restaurants and places and shops. I'm seeing or hearing about that.
Yeah.
So.
Good point. I think what we're finding across the country too is it's sort of that destination, the lifestyle.
Yep.
Right. While Amazon is bursting at the seams, people still want the experience of socializing with other people, whether it's through coffee and what we're finding with younger people, they like higher density typically because they want to do things after work or after dinner with their kids and with other kids or other families. So that to them it's a lifestyle pursuit. Not better, worse, just different.
I guess the flip side to that too, with growth that you're talking about, is that not everybody in Fair Oaks Ranch wants the growth.
Right.
And I think that is a problem in of itself. Not that, you have the younger set that might want more growth. But, to what Keith was saying, small commercial, okay, but don't knock down every tree, don't make up another parking lot,
Right.
and things that are necessary for that as well.
I think the key there, it came up a lot in the public meetings yesterday, the word that I think is the underpinning to that is the ambiance of the community. How do you maintain that? And I would build on that and say when you do commercial development, much like you've done already, is how do you make it suitable for the community? The signage, the look, the feel, the access, a little bit of that alignment, right? So it fits in well into the community, and it's not.
It also expands to the housing developments, okay?
Correct.
So we have a development that's going, I live on the backside of the city, as we refer to. There's a development that's going in that's knocked down every tree, right? You can see it, and that's what the people that are in that part of town are talking to me about. Is that, wait a second, we live in a tree city USA. These are things that we don't want to see. And that has to be balanced by everybody else in the city as well. So,
Well, what I've noticed is just, and somewhat distinctive to Fair Oaks Ranch is, think of this as a three-legged stool, right, about development. And I'm generalizing here, but to your point about residential development in particular, easy for me to do here. Bless you. When you think about residential development, and I'm not telling you anything you know, I'm just going to show this as a diagram, a three-legged stool. There's the city, there's the HOA, and there's property rights. And that came up a lot in those public meetings. Whoops. How do you reconcile and synchronize these three dimensions? Because if you know, part of your heritage is you're strong on property rights in Texas. That's cool, right? That's okay. But then the role of the HOA, which in some respects is more restrictive than what the city is about their development code. So how do you work through some of that? I'm sure your neighbors have presented, what's the city doing? It's like, well, how much discretion do we really have to influence those decisions? Some of that comes through the deeds and restrictions in that HOA. Fair enough, I'm just sharing that with you. To me, that's an opportunity to say, how do you move forward to not only inform the public, but how do you partner with some of these HOAs to have some shared understanding about what you're trying to create with the ambiance, with the texture, with the lifestyle, so it's not just clear cutting. I hope that makes sense how I describe that.
No, I absolutely understand and I absolutely agree with that, but not all areas are, when you have 70 HOAs.
Right,
You know, that, okay.
yeah.
You know, how many are toothless tigers and how many are actually strong active HOAs?
Yeah.
Kind of thing, so.
Well point, well point.
As a city, we need to be able to go ahead and work with everybody, but also we need to be maybe provide a little guidance and maybe be in those discussions.
Well, and I think one of the areas the steering committee will come back to a lot is what's the city's role about a lot of these different dimensions. Some of these are core services, but as they start to flirt with maybe making some changes in areas that historically they've not been as actively involved with, I'll keep bringing them back to, okay, what's your role in that? Is it a facilitator? Is it a convener? Is it an advocate? Is it the doer? And there's always that challenge of trying to find a healthy balance between that, right?
And keeping the community active in those discussions.
And some communities, I don't mean to be glib about this, but some communities are kind of pregnant, which is biologically impossible. In other words, they have their foot on the gas and the brake at the same time, and then they wonder why they're not making progress. To your credit, I think you've been deliberate and intentional about where you're pressing on the gas, and this strategic plan is trying to do that as well. Not necessarily go faster, but know where you're going and not be paralyzed by the fear of making a mistake, so you're caught in that conundrum of, what if some people don't like it? And then how do you deal with dissent? That's always a challenge in community of all sizes. How do you deal with that? So I'm just using that as an example. So, any other trends that you notice? Just trying to flesh this out, trying to get your thoughts, trying to fix it.
Patrick, I'll offer one that I don't think came up in our other sessions, and that's traffic control and traffic enforcement.
All right.
Through our Transportation Safety Advisory Committee process and others, do we raise or lower speed limits on corridors in neighborhoods? Have more stop signs or crosswalks we're even getting questions about. That's on the traffic control side. And enforcement, as a Primera Police Department, should we be issuing more tickets? Should we be more of a compliance-oriented force? So Council has addressed several of those questions in the last year plus, but that's something that we're seeing on the rise as a hyper-local issue here.
Right. And that's probably just going to continually be a challenge, be an increase with the volume.
Hope not.
Usually the people that call in about traffic enforcement are the first ones that get pulled over, right, Chief? Kind of uncanny that way. So. All right. Well, let me move on to the vision, and I put some information on page 5 of your handout on the vision. This is just a description. We're not going to read through all this, but in short, a vision is a destination you never achieve. It's a magnet into the future. You're always trying to pursue your vision. You're not already there. So it's pulling you into the future. A mission is how you get there. The vision is for the community. The mission is for your staff. The vision is where you're going. The mission is how you get there. So what we wanted to do, and you already have this on the next page, we don't want to make the assumption that every member of the governing body is aware of what the vision and mission are. So we want to at least touch base with you so you can see we're not trying to wordsmith it tonight. The steering committee will take a stab at that and bring that back to you at some point in the near future. But these are the current vision and mission, and I'm assuming these are dated back to 2018. I don't know if they predated that or if they were conceived in 2018. 2018? Okay, so the vision. Let me just read this aloud while you process this. We just want to scrub it a little bit tonight. Get your reaction to it. Are you good? Do you think it might need a few changes? We don't want to go in the laboratory tonight and spend all the time making the changes, but we're just trying to get an idea. To offer the ideal place to call home in the Hill Country, guided by strong community values and responsible growth that provides residents of all ages a place to relax and reconnect. What do you think? What's your reaction to that? Still valid? Still helpful? Still forward-looking? Still inspirational? What do you think? What's your reaction to that? Some of you haven't looked at this in a while.
Scott, is this from our current plan?
Yes.
This is from our current?
Yes, this is the current one. This has not been,
Plan, and as David just alluded to, we've obviously since 2018-20, we made a lot of changes to the plan, but that stayed
That's the
consistent
current one,
throughout.
okay.
yes. We just want to touch base with you and see initially what your reactions are. Still good? Maybe it needs a little spitball. We're not trying to make all the changes, but we're also, for the steering committee's benefit, trying to get a read on you all as the council to see if you have an appetite that you think some changes need to be made.
I think as you described it, it does provide a destination. It's a
Yep.
concept. As you described also, the one you cannot achieve. And
That's
it
okay.
does, I think it meets that criteria.
Yep.
I think it highlights, an ideal place to call home, strong community, responsible growth, and good place for all ages to reconnect. I think it's really pretty much the concept of what we want as part of our city.
And there's no particular expiration on vision statements, right? Some communities have them for a long time. That's okay. Sometimes they revisit it periodically. Maybe there might be turnover with council or turnover with staff. And that's what we're doing now, is revisiting it. We just don't want to make the assumption that, well, it's all good, because some people haven't read it in a while. And a vision is a kind of a beacon into the future. And the steering committee will come back to it a lot as they start to craft goals and objectives and the strategic pillars. Yes, Councilmember.
I'm going to be completely honest in that most of the vision and missions that I have read through this process, they all seem very vague, right? And this one is also a little vague in that same vein, right? But I think that how we get to this is more important than what it says right here, right?
And I would offer you, building on that, a vision statement is a conversation starter. It's not supposed to be a long run-on sentence.
Sure.
I call that the kitchen sink syndrome. We've all read visions that just go on, and if people can't remember it, they're not using it. So when you read this, a resident reads this, people go, what are you doing? Let's talk about what we're doing, to your point. Let's talk about how we're trying to pursue the vision by intent. Oh, now I see. Then it starts to make sense by the evidence of the actions that you're taking. Not that it's trying to check all the boxes, and then sometimes it becomes so generic it means nothing.
With
It's
that
so vague.
understanding, I think that this checks that box perfectly.
You're trying to be somewhat prescriptive, not just descriptive. Thoughts, reactions?
I'm not sure I have anything to add to that vision, right? Because, I mean, to the mayor's point, I mean, we're already on a path that exhibits that, and whether you say you can't arrive, I'm not sure I'm not sure I'd agree with you that you can't arrive at the end of a vision, but I think this is, when I look at this, I look at it like it's a target state, but it's also a state that we're actually achieving as we go.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to make the distinction is it's pulling you into the future and you're continually trying to arrive at that, but it's not static, right? It's
Right, it's not
always moving.
static.
It's a moving target in that sense. But it's a beacon. And people should feel inspired by it when they read it, like, okay, that's cool, let's be bold. No one aspires to be average. I don't think that doesn't enlist their better notion of themselves. So when people read that and go, that's cool, I want to be in a place like that. I want to be somewhat bold, not just be overly pragmatic. So okay, that's good. Now the mission is how you get there. The mission is really for your staff. It's not so much for the public. So the vision is where, the mission is how. So to read the mission, to deliver exceptional public services. That's quite a qualitative statement, right? Not just to deliver services, but exceptional. That implies a lot. You're doing the ordinary in an extraordinary way. Preserve the natural beauty of our city. So that's the backdrop. You're not making radical changes in their pursuit. Protect and promote quality of life, as evidenced by all departments. They're always trying to be standard bearers of that. And foster community engagement, which is pretty avant-garde back in 2018 to talk about a community engagement, because it was still kind of in its infancy. We didn't really even know what that meant, public outreach, all of that. So what do you think about that? Do you think that gives staff a sense of direction, a sense of purpose? Is that a good compass for them to rely on as they move into the future trying to pursue the vision?
I see it. This really hasn't changed in my mind.
Okay,
I agree.
sound good?
And I feel like I would say in the last, 2 years, the foster community engagement has increased significantly.
Yeah.
The focus on that, I
Absolutely.
should say, maybe the focus. So I think we're trying to make more of that happen, obviously. We can't force people to be engaged, right? But we're trying to hit all the channels.
Right.
We're doing better at it, I would say.
And I think a build on that, what we're seeing around the nation that you're definitely in that space of doing is, and this sounds like an odd way to describe it, but foster community engagement, it's really now a verb, not a noun. It's not an event, it's a process. You're always going to be doing it. It's not as though, oh, we did something, we're done.
I feel like that we've taken that to heart.
Absolutely you have. Yeah.
We put money into social media, we put,
Yep.
money into software to go ahead and help with that mission. We've talked, all of us have been out talking to different community groups about different issues that have come up, whether we like the community center, whether we hate the community center, whatever that happened to be.
Right.
As a city, all of us, council and staff, have taken that to heart. I think we're kind of on point.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. And I think you're going to find that's going to be a continuous priority to kind of help you stay grounded and hear from people that may sometimes otherwise not participate formally. How do you incorporate that input into your public policy discussions? How you, incorporate that into just to your, what you decide to do as a local government? How do you factor that in?
Well, we'll provide the channels for them to go
Right.
ahead with it.
Right.
You can't drag some people into it.
Right.
But we try and provide that avenue.
I mean, to your point about, I think you made back here on page 4 about the COVID-19, which really should be relabeled trust in government. I think, people naturally don't trust government, and we all don't trust it either, as council members. So our job is to be as transparent as possible. We're not perfect at it, but this is something we got to keep focusing on.
Yeah.
Right, just so people can say, okay, this is good or this is not good, and be able to be heard.
Yeah, and I think part of what you're contending with at a much larger scale is the transparency is you're trying to demonstrate to the public they may not agree with the decision you make, but the process sometimes is as important as the outcome. Do they feel the opportunity to participate? Do they feel as though everything was done, you all know this, done above board?
Yeah.
No community is immune from criticism, but sometimes the criticism is about the process, not just the decision.
Right.
And I think that's where transparency is really trying to intersect and disrupt is the process. Because I would tell you transparency is used coast to coast, and it means different things to different people. People often define it in their own version, and I think government's always in the process of trying to manage expectations what transparency actually means, beyond the open meeting law.
And some of those definitions are not transparent.
No, right?
I mean,
Yes.
honestly.
Yeah, right. So we're good with the vision and mission. Good for the steering committee to know that. They may tinker with it, but just gives them some sense of discretion and hey, the council's supportive of that. There might be a tweak here or two, but who knows? It may end up, and there's some benefit from them to just hash it through. If they arrive at it and there's no decisions have been made, that's cool. Now they understand the spirit behind it. What's it really trying to do? And it's not just words on a page. Okay. The final piece for tonight, and we're doing well on time here, so I hope everybody's satisfied with that, is we're on page 7. And this is also from the current strategic action plan. And the city of Fair Oaks Ranch call it strategic pillars and priorities. There's a preamble there at the top of alignment of mission and vision with strategic pillars and priorities, but I want to direct your attention to the 5 actually pillars. And in no particular order, so we want to review these tonight, make sure they're still relevant. 1 is financial resilience and responsibility. I'm going to give you a chance to process these, but I'm going to read through them. 2 is responsible growth management. And there's activities underneath both of these, right? 3rd is reliable and sustainable infrastructure. 4th is public health and safety. And the final one is operational excellence, which I think is indicative of trends in government where you've added that 5th. You're sort of looking at yourself, how do you maintain the quality in your organizational performance? And that's definitely trending. That's a good one. The top 4 are usually the usual suspects in most cities. I've been doing this a long time. Managing money, public safety, infrastructure, sometimes it's economic development or growth. They run hot and cold. But what we wanted to do, we're not trying to peel all of this back, but we just want to make sure, check in with all of you. Are those still relevant? Are they still credible? Are they still spot? Again, the steering committee is going to get into those. Where they're going to be doing the yeoman's work is getting into goals and objectives, actions and measures. And most cities don't change the strategic pillars. What changes are the goals and objectives. Those are pretty standard. So, but we don't want to make assumptions that everybody knows what they are and nobody wants to make changes, but we wanted to get your reaction tonight. I know for some of you this may have been a while since you've looked at them, and that's okay. But what do you think about it?
I think the first four are well thought out and cover the responsibilities, excuse me, or requirements that we as a council or staff have towards the operations of the city.
Yep.
And so I think they're pretty thorough. And then I think the way you described to me operational excellence, those four look externally and what it is that we want as part of a community, how we maintain that. The fifth one, operational excellence, probably focuses more internal in the services or specific services that we provide to our residents or to the community. And so it's, to me, it's kind of a catch-all, maybe, for those things that are not included as part of the other areas. But when we talk about safety and security being number one requirement to our residents, we want to manage growth, we want to provide quality essential services, and financial responsibility as part of our efforts to our residents. I think, I mean, they could be, we could find another way to word it, but right now I think it fits. In general terms, I know I kind of
That's okay.
reworded them, but in general terms, I believe, I see that as our requirements or responsibilities to our community.
Okay. And I would build on that, Mayor, thank you for sharing, is the operational excellence in some respects is the linchpin to executing all those. The capabilities of your staff, the use of technology, all those other resources that are sort of inside the building, if you will, to help execute all of that.
Now, I say all that, and I'm open
Sure.
to any way that we want to look at this, or if somebody sees a better way to approach it.
Yeah.
It's just my thought process and the way I see it.
Right.
If we look at it and you say, we could reconsider, I'm open to doing things better.
We wanted to get your reaction tonight to what you see. Is it still relevant? Maybe again, tweaking a little bit. The steering committee will take a look at it. They might modify things here and there. Most cities don't make dramatic changes to their strategic pillars. Sometimes it's refinement, a little wordsmithing, but fundamentally, those are what you're in the business of doing and what the strategic plan is trying to target resources toward. So there's not dramatic changes in those. Again, what often changes are the goals and objectives. And that's where the steering committee probably will spend a bulk of their time. Sounds good. This is the what. Then it's now what? How do you execute against that? And that's usually where you have to really, then it's prioritizing. Hey, that sounds really good. Do we have the resources? That sounds really good. Those are all discussions the steering committee will have. But again, I go back to all of you, your reactions to that. These key pillars. What do you think? Sound good, solid, still relevant, still credible? Feeling good about it?
I believe this is what we work with. These have worked well in the past 4 years that I've been around. I don't see anything that needs to be tweaked. I mean, I'm not speaking for the steering committee, but these are the things that are important certainly important to me as a leader, part of the community.
Yeah.
I think these are things that we do every day, especially when we get down to the internal operational excellence. You know, we take care of our employers. We look to hire. We're doing our employee manual so that things are clearer and better, so that we can keep and maintain and cut down on the poaching of our good employees to other cities.
One of the benefits from doing this tonight for all of you, especially for the steering committee, is in some respects, the public is the audience for the strategic plan. Your role is to be advocates. So that's why we're trying to make sure and not make assumptions that everybody understands this, because once this is adopted, you're going to be on point to ensuring its execution. So it really helps the steering committee as they get into the pushing up their sleeves and doing the work about understanding where you're all coming from and your advocacy and your support and your endorsement. That way they can spend time on things that they see really needing critical attention, not spending, and that's my role too, is to make sure, not just spending time, but making sure the process is productive to really flesh out those dimensions and not just go through this as some sort of bureaucratic exercise. I hope that resonates with you, just how this whole night helps the steering committee. Because if we didn't do this with you all, then the steering committee would get caught in this trap of, I wonder where council's coming from. I wonder if they really want, and then there's council members on the steering committee, and then they're trying to talk to all of you. So that's why we were doing this tonight, to give the steering committee some guideposts and say, well, we heard from council, they're good with most of this. Let's spend some time on the goals and objectives.
I think it'd be worth, bringing it to the steering committee and at least getting a viewpoint from the other members that are on the
Absolutely.
committee. You know, if there is something that comes up, my thoughts is that really the goals and objectives are probably the areas that we need to
Right.
try to spend the majority of time on. And then I think you mentioned earlier, how do we develop those measurable criteria so that we understand where we're at in meeting those goals and objectives?
And remember, this is an update to an existing plan. I've worked with cities that never even had a plan, so we're spending time on the foundational principles. You've already done a lot of that, the foundation, the rudimentary, the pillars, and what have you. So this is an update. You're revising the process. So it's not uncommon to spend less time on the vision, mission, and strategic pillars and more time on the goals and objectives. So that framework is still relevant, the rubric, whatever you want to call it. So we want to push up the sleeves and get to work on those aspects, to your point, Mayor. We don't want to spend time, again, review it, but not spend a lot of staff time from the steering committee on things that you already support and you see as relevant. Because again, you're the advocates. The public is the audience, but you're the advocates. And the more you support it, the less time staff has to spend on those dimensions. So, and I included several pages after that you can read at your own convenience, just examples from other jurisdictions. The good ones are from clients, the bad ones are not clients. So just to use that as an example. But I think it's helpful. Well, and I share this with the steering committee, I'm going to share examples with them. It's good to look at things like that are helpful, give them some way about how cities are addressing issues, but it's also good to look at why are they going on and on about that. So you can learn a lot from lessons learned from cities that don't know when to stop, and they just go on and on about it. So try to be concise, clear, and compelling in the goals and objectives, as well as the measures. And that is one area that local governments tend to cross-pollinate. They look at how other cities are doing measures and sort of repurpose those for their own benefit.
You know, as we go through this process, I looked at several other strategic action plans even prior to this process. And in my opinion, some develop a plan to say they have a plan. And it goes in a book, in a binder, and it goes on a shelf, and do you have a strategic action plan? We do. My belief is this is a planning tool, and it should have a functional requirement as part of our planning process and what we determine what we need to do as part of the city. We have good priorities.
Absolutely.
You know, they could be modified if needed, but what we need is something that provides a measurable way of determining the effectiveness of what we want for our city. Are we making progress?
Yep.
And so, to me, it's more than just a document we put in a binder. This is something that becomes a part of our cyclical, yearly process of what we're determining the priorities for improvement or effectiveness in the city.
Yeah, it's a decision-making device, and you might find over your tenure on council where you start to see the strategic plan as a influential resource as you start to look at budget discussions. A lot of cities have done that where they see the strategic plan as sort of the driving force. That takes time, though, and it takes practice, it takes continuity among council, but this is not budget 2.0. In other words, it's not working in concurrently with it, or separately from it, I should say, but it's you're trying to flush out what are those major policy initiatives. Because some of the items in the strategic plan don't have a price tag, and that's a good thing. It's really about priorities or a policy or a principle. It's not always about a dollar figure to it. And something else going forward that I will recommend is that you do regular updates to the strategic plan, like quarterly. What do we do? What are we doing? Where are we going? If the item on a staff report from Scott and the staff is referenced about the strategic plan, to reinforce it, because the more you see it in front of you, the more you'll see value as a device. It's not a straitjacket, but it shouldn't be optional. And to the mayor's point, I've seen it too many times. I try to help go from what, so what, to now what. Execution is the strategy. Again, it's like a fitness plan. Your fitness plan isn't any good if all you do is drive by the gym, so I hear. You sort of have to work the plan, do you not? You got to actually go into the gym. And I just use that as a really simple example. And sometimes an element in this is change. So you have to get comfortable with sometimes spearheading that change. It might be a little disruptive to the community, it might be disruptive to staff. We don't know that yet, but it's not just business as usual. Because then it becomes a glorified work plan. And a strategic plan requires strategic thinking, and that can be a bit of a reach. You're trying to look at things broader, deeper, than just here's a work plan, you're just going to do more of what you're doing. I hope that resonates with you too as this process unfolds. So, yes.
I think it's been mentioned where I think one of our, not necessarily on this page, but one of our goals is increasing communication in the community, increasing citizen involvement and engagement. I'm curious whether, this is open to anyone, would that, if we want to put more focus on that, would that be an individual pillar, or is that a goal and objective within each pillar?
Good question. It may be both, right? That it's a priority emphasis in a certain dimension of key pillar, but then it's woven in to different actions within goals and objectives. That remains to be seen, but I think that's a great point. And I think cities are always struggling with that. Where does it fit? Well, over here it's an emphasis. At the same time, we have to operationalize it in different dimensions. So that's a good point to make. So the next steps are, we'll do a summary of all the community, all the input I've gathered the last 2 days. I'll have that to Jim next week so he can distribute that. I'll summarize tonight's meeting as well so you can have a document, right, to reference. I'll be back in February. I'll bring some nice lobster from Maine for you if you're interested.
Nice.
All right, that's to get your attention.
Hold you to
Of course,
that.
just don't barbecue it, okay? Anyway, so I'll be back in February.
I've got a great recipe.
I'm sure you do. So I'll be back in February 18th and 19th for the steering committee. Again, we'll do a summary. There's going to be public engagement process going on. And then we're going to be back in March to really try to fine tune this. And I'll be back before you. You'll get updates. So I would encourage you to read those so when the draft plan is presented to you in April, that you're familiar with it, that you're comfortable with it. Also, because you have steering committee members on council, they're kind of the connective tissue between this process. Right? There is some political calculus to this. I know you're elected officials, so there's always some political content to that, calculus to that. So, again, I appreciate the opportunity tonight. I hope that you found the process beneficial. Yes.
So between this meeting and the next full council meeting, is there any homework per se that council should do, or?
I would say that, and we'll make sure to maybe review the current strategic action plan just to get familiar with the content and know that some changes are going to be forthcoming to the goals. So we'll make sure that gets out to you, right? I know you have tons to read, but I think just getting more familiar with it. Some of you, it may have been a while for some people, but just get familiar with people. And tonight, really, as I mentioned and the mayor did, the strategy here is kind of the old concept of participation breeds commitment. Just candidly, I've never met an elected official that was excited about implementing something they didn't have a hand in creating. So we didn't want to make the assumption that everybody understood all the content here. So that's why we walked you through this. I hope that you found the time valuable and beneficial. I know it does for me and the steering committee because we take our lead from all of you. And because you endorse these dimensions, now we can get to work on looking at the goals, objectives, and measures. Not spend time on other things. So,
I would
yes.
say to the steering committee, as y'all look at this, to Ruben's point about community involvement, I don't know how it fits in what we have, so we maybe figure that out, because we have been focusing on that operationally, trying to do that. So does that fit within one of these categories, or do we need to rename, rebrand a category, or does it need to be another pillar? I'm not sure. I don't have an answer, but I think that would be worthy of a focus, because I don't see where we have it really articulated well in our pillars. And since we're in that part of our life cycle here.
Well, I noticed it's sort of a measure potentially within operational excellence, like are we doing these things? But it's not, maybe needs to also be a focus on how we do it.
Yeah.
I agree with what they're
Yeah.
both saying, 100%.
And having it as a pillar is trending, so it's a standalone pillar.
I'm not advocating it. I'm just suggesting that,
Okay.
all I'm doing is suggesting we look at it and see if that makes sense
Sure.
versus, to Ruben's point, making it more visible within where we're at. So.
Good point.
Any final questions for me before I move on?
Concerns about the process, or?
Questions?
Seems my concern, we're throwing it at the steering committee and then bringing it back for one meeting for us. I don't know. It's maybe a lot to absorb.
Two meetings, two steering group.
No, I'm
set-
talking about for the council. Draft.
But I think we probably need to, I think you mentioned finding ways to keep council updated.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe, you may not even be here, but maybe there's ways we can add
Yeah.
it. And
This-
We've already programmed an update for March as well, so after each steering committee, you'll have an update.
Well, that'd be good, and maybe, would it be an update where we can opine on it, or would it
Does
just
it
be
say
an
update and discussion?
Yes,
Okay.
All right, then I'm good with that.
yeah.
That.
Because by the time it's on the formal agenda, there's some dress rehearsals here,
Right.
right? And that iterative process lends itself to that. So by the time it's formally on your agenda, some of that has all been flushed out and incorporated and massaged, all that good stuff. We don't want to wait till then and then go, oh, we didn't know that.
Yep.
So,
I think you did start off with that comment, making sure that we keep council informed
Absolutely.
along the way. So that when it does get to the approval process, it's not, they haven't seen this before.
I was just looking at his schedule, that's why I brought that up.
some of that will be done by Scott and the staff, which they can do obviously very well. I don't need to do that during your formal council meetings.
Any other concerns? Good point. Patrick, did you get everything you needed?
I
tonight?
did, absolutely. Thank you so much for the time and opportunity. Continue our partnership. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks.
Amanda, anything else that we need to do as part of tonight's meeting?
No, Mayor.
Scott, anything else you need to cover?
Aye.
I have the time is 6:52 and we are adjourned.